My name is Jenny. The story that I'm going to be sharing today, it's the ending of a beautiful, tragic love story. I had previously been married to my son's father, which of course didn't work for many reasons, mostly being that I didn't like men. I lived in a very, very small town where it wasn't acceptable to like women. I never known another woman that liked or loved another woman. We met in paramedic school. Day one, we hit it off. We started talking. We immediately became friends. She immediately kept asking for me to join her for lunch or go study with her. And I denied that for 2 years. But once I said, yes, I'll go camping with you, everything was very fast. Within 3 weeks, we were moved in, living with one another. Within 6 weeks or so, I took her to my family's Thanksgiving. Everything was wonderful in the beginning. And then signs of stress really started to show about 2 years in, really to the relationship. Signs of built up, what I now understand were the signs of PTSD. I did have that sense of feeling, and I did actually 2 years in write a very long letter about fundamentally there was something that was not right, and we weren't going to be successful. And I left, and that lasted for 30 hours. I came back. I felt real grief for another person for the first time in my life. And then from there, it was a tumultuous love-hate relationship. As the time went by, there were arguments. We argued. We fought all the time. And of course, that would begin that we were also partners. So we didn't have breaks in between. It was a very codependent relationship. We really we never had that separate time. We kept things professional at work. And then as the years went on, doing that all the time, even in our home, because they would things escalate to downright screaming matches, throwing things at each other, breaking things. There was a lot of that, but things definitely had escalated back and forth over the years. And I never tried to leave again, because also during that time period, I became ill. I was diagnosed with lupus. Fibromyalgia is where it began. I had to leave my career. That was really devastating to me. It was another period of identification of who am I now that I don't have this career, but also very terrifying that I was going through a lot of sickness and illness. I wasn't able to work. What was I going to do? Where was I going to go? How was I going to take care of myself? I didn't have family that I could lean on financially in any way. I honestly, truly believed that love, was the answer, and that love at the end of the day would prevail, and that I could support herself to be better. Sometimes choking the words down would be over silly things, like, how could you have missed that we needed this supply on the truck and now we're on a call and we don't have it and it's your fault, right? We were, though, paramedics, and we did realize that even at a certain point that we absolutely had to reach out for help. And we did that. And we were going to counseling. She was going to counseling. We were both doing it independently and then together. She had been placed on anti-anxiety meds, and she had been placed on antidepressants, and they would help for a little bit, and then they wouldn't, and then they would and they wouldn't. So there was about a 6-month period where there was a lot of going back and forth and a lot of up and downs, but there had been signs of improvement and some things stabilizing, within our own biology and chemically within our own body. And so things were good. They were pretty good, but when it stopped working, and it seemed really like it would be overnight, it would be 2 or 3 weeks of a little bit of reprieve, and then it would just kind of seem to nod, and then there would be a 2 or 3 week period of waiting to get back into the doctor, and them saying, of course, that, well, we just have to give it some time and different things like that as we were going along. And things really escalated overall in the big picture about 5 years before, when her mother passed away. And there were just a lot of unresolved things. So that really came through a lot. It really was a huge log in the fire, if you will, of what was burning and raging within her. When she would allow those thoughts or feelings to really tumble around, I think that I would, become the receiving end of her frustrations of not being able to have those conversations with her mom and things like that. So for 6 weeks, we had the medicine game, and about 2 weeks before the height of everything that happened, for the pinnacle of that, she had been switched on some of her medicines, and there was an immediate change, and it was immediately for the worse, and it was the most angry, vicious, physical creation of this person that I had ever witnessed. One night I came home, and when I got home from work, it was late. It was 10 o'clock, and she was not there. I knew instinctually that there was something that was amiss in the matrix, if you will. And I had sat down and I had tried to call her a few times, and I had not gotten an answer. I just stayed. I stayed in my clothes. I actually sat down holding the keys to the car for 2.5 hours before I finally did receive the phone call. And the phone call was from a local emergency room department, and she was a patient, and she had. And so I had a huge range of emotions, from terror, anger, fear. I drove the 45 minutes to the hospital. And when I got to the hospital, no one said a word. And that's kind of just the way it is, when everybody knows you. And so nobody said anything. I really wish they had of, because she was not alone. And when I opened the door, what I saw was her in a very covered in activated charcoal, with the wildest displaced look of in a human's face that can have, and was there. This had been going on for about 10 years, and I always suspected, and we'd had so many fights about it, but it had always been denied. There was no denying. And she was standing at her bedside, and she was feeding Amy ice chips. And I looked straight at her, and I did tell her in that moment, "You should have died." And I walked out, and I called my brother, and I told him, what was happening. And it was an hour before I could calm down enough to go back in to the hospital and back into her room. And when I did, she was alone. The social worker had come and said, that she would be detained for 72 hours for observation, as was the law to do so. That we were waiting on the doctor to come sign on that. They asked me questions about her prior attempts, because there had been a few prior attempts as well in the years working up to this moment. They were going to keep her. And that was my thought process. And that's what they said. And then the next thing I know, they are coming back and saying, no, that they are releasing her. And they are releasing her in my care and my custody, because there wasn't room at the mental health hospital for her. We got our discharge papers. We got in the car, and I drove across a few blocks to food. We went in and got it and came back out to the car. We got it to go, and she wanted to drive. And so I gave the keys to her. And as soon as we were in the car and we shut the doors, she looked at me straight in the eye, very determined, very clear, no more haze, just determination and rage. And she said to me that I needed to enjoy my food, because it was going to be the last meal that I was going to eat, and that neither one of us were going to see the morning. And she locked the doors to the car, and she raced out of the parking lot. I froze. So much happens in that moment. There's a part of you that is saying, you knew this. The other part saying, no, I did not. I didn't know this. Is this really happening? Does she mean it? Is she capable? Surely she's not. But then that look and the feeling in the car and the air, it was so heavy. And I knew in my gut that I was in for a fight for my life. I knew that in that moment, I was going to have to stay alert, stay calm, stay focused enough to be able to talk my way through anything that was going to unfold. So much of the next 72 hours was a mindful connection that I kept with myself to keep focused on that I had to live. I kept focused on my son, of course, the whole entire time, that I had to make it out alive for my son, that I did not have a choice to lose this fight. We barely even made it home, but she ended up passing out in the car. And it actually took me 4 hours to get her from the car inside the house because she was dead weight. I'm 5 foot and she was 6'3". And I was dragging her, and so during that time period, I'm thinking, oh God, good, this is okay. She's gonna come back to consciousness, and this is just gonna be something that we're not gonna necessarily laugh about, but this threat is gonna be over. And I got her into the house, and I did very quickly. We had one firearm in the house, and it was a 12-gauge shotgun. We were house sitting for our neighbors, and I did manage to get her in the house, and I had gotten her into the living room floor. And as quickly as I could at that point, before I even got her in the house, I had ran in the house. I had gotten the gun. I had ran across the street to the house that we were house sitting for, and I had put the gun in their spare room underneath the daybed mattress, up underneath a whole bunch of scrapping materials, thinking that put that out of the equation, and that at least I wasn't going to have to fight that. Even if I, was in a physical fight, I wasn't going to have to fight the threat of a gun. And I was wrong then, too. I got her in, I did that. I also got a hold of every single medication, threw them in a Walmart bag, threw them inside of the dryer, because that's the last place somebody's, going to look. And also it was the quickest place I had to be able to put it. And I did things like that to safeguard her and myself during the bouts of her being in consciousness and coming back in and out of consciousness. Every moment of her coming back into consciousness, she'd thrown my phone out of the car. I think I forgot to mention that. So I didn't have a phone. It was in the middle of the night at this point, and who wants to be a burden? And that was just the truth of the matter. I didn't want to be a burden, and I didn't already what was going to happen. I already knew that there was no place for her to go. They sent her home with me because there was no place for her to go, right? And so I just kind of felt alone, and I did feel responsible to not abandon her to her own sickness. Though eventually, through the bouts of her coming to consciousness, she had gotten more aggressive with each time. And I did finally decide that I was going to try to attempt to get help again. And I did. I went to the neighbor's house. I used their phone and I called an ambulance, and they transported her. And I made sure they took her to a different hospital in a different county when everybody was in the room. And when they would leave the room, she would immediately whip her head straight to me and just right into my soul and threaten me and tell me again how I was not going to live to see the morning or the day. I told the police, and I told the nurses, and I told the doctors and the social workers. They all knew. All I was told was that there was nothing that they could do. There was nowhere for her to go. And they didn't, again, have space for a mental health patient, because it was not seen as a dire, life-threatening emergency for her or for me. And so again, we were released. And again, I then felt more hopeless, more helpless than ever. And from that point forward, there was not a moment that I was not in a physical fight for my life for the next 30 or so hours. At a point, I had managed to get away from her, kicking and fighting and screaming, and I had gone outside. I had the keys to the car. I had gotten in the car. I trying to start the car, but I'm, shaking like in a movie. It really was like some things just straight out of a movie, although every single second of it transpired so slowly. It's permanently etched in my mind and in my body. I will never forget these moments. I'm reaching down and I'm trying to find them. I pick them up 2 or 3 times and I drop them immediately back down as I'm in the car and trying to just know, like, if I can get the keys in the car and if I can just start the car, if I can just get the car started and just get backed up, I'm gonna be okay. And looking up, finally getting, and almost just not even still having the keys in the ignition yet, and looking up in the rear view mirror, seeing the moonlight gleaming off of the gun barrel and seeing her. And not that she was holding it, it was pointed to the back of my head. It was pointed at me. And I needed to drop the keys and get out of the car. And that was my only option at that moment to stay alive, at least for another few seconds. And I was willing to do whatever it took to get those few seconds in at a time. And so I did. I got out of the car. I threw the keys myself. I threw the keys across in the yard, in the neighbor's yard, to signal that I will not try this again. I won't try to escape this way again. You can trust me. We walked back into the house, and of course she grabbed me by the back of my neck and also still has the gun. And as we're walking up the steps of the front porch into the house, she is telling me how painless it's going to be, telling me how much she loves me and how much this is the best for both of us, telling me how our son is going to be okay without both of us in his life. All the things that she had convinced herself of. And I'm crying. I'm blinded by tears. And I'm froze. And I'm walking step by step by step through the kitchen. And now we're in the hall and we're feet away from the bedroom. And I know that those are my feet, that I have to make some kind of a move. Something is going to happen in this few feet, and that's either going to be the end or it's going to be the end that still has a beginning for me. And I began to fight because the washer and dryer were here. It's made the area that we were in smaller, and I began to fight again. And so it's a body shoving contest at this point of back and forth in the small area and in the door frame of the door, me putting my legs up, me using my body against the back and in every way that I could to stop her from forcing me back into that room again, and also holding on to the gun as we're, wrestling and fighting with this gun. And she shoved me so hard that it knocked the door facing in the door literally back on top of her. And right next to the dryer in that same little area was the back door. And I literally stepped on the door on top of her back to open the back door. And I ran. And I was naked. I didn't have clothes on. I had I didn't have any clothes on. I was naked and I ran and I screamed, and I had screamed before. And as the story unfolded and a few neighbors found out what had happened and what had transpired, they were so upset because they didn't hear me scream. They were so upset that in the end, when the gunshot did ring through the night, they didn't hear it. They didn't hear it, even though they were feet away. But it's amazing what even the thinnest walls can hide, even when you want something to be shared or exposed. My best friend lived about 3 blocks away. It was 4:13 in the morning when I entered into her house and banged on the door, and they came. They were still awake for some reason, still with the front door open. It's just the storm door. And of course, oh my God, what's wrong? 7 minutes later, her husband picked up the phone to dial 911 after I'd managed to calm down enough to say what had happened, because they didn't know what had happened. And at that point, I was hysterical. Because everything that I'd held in and kept together for so long, it all just came racing out. And Amy had already called 911 herself, because she had the constitution to know that whoever would come and respond to her lifeless body would be people that she knew, brothers and sisters in civil service, that we had worked together. And she called them and she apologized to them. And then she took her life on our front porch at 4:20 a.m. Everything changed in my life. Everything changed in my son's life. All of this full story, I kept to myself all of these years. All the beautiful things that she had done and all the people that she had helped and all the lives that she had saved. And now I know that me telling the truth of what we experienced doesn't taint her memory for my son, for myself, or for her, or anyone that knew her. But it's a responsibility that I have to let other people know that our mental health and wellness is just as important, maybe even more important than our physical health.